Welcome back to Mayo Clinic Radio. I'm Dr. Tom Shives.
And I'm Tracy McRae.
Well, next week, American families will gather to celebrate Thanksgiving. The best part of the day? Well,
Turkey.
Well, for some people, it's that delicious Thanksgiving turkey and all the fixings. But if you're in charge of making the bird, which you probably are, are you a little nervous? I mean, what kind of turkey do you buy? Should you get a fresh or frozen one? How do you store the turkey before you cook it? Lots of questions.
Well, luckily, there is help for those of us who are hosting that big meal. The U.S. Department of Agriculture runs a meat and poultry hotline that will field thousands of calls about Thanksgiving food safety. But we're going to get some of those answers right here and right now on Mayo Clinic Radio. Joining us on the phone to discuss is the Deputy Undersecretary for Food Safety at the USDA, Carmen Rottenberg. Welcome back to the program. It's nice to meet you, Ms. Rottenberg.
Thanks so much.
Hey, Carmen, glad to have you with us. So I guess one of the first question would be, when do you buy your turkey?
So it depends on if you want to buy a fresh or frozen turkey. If you want to buy a frozen turkey, you can buy it many days ahead of Thanksgiving. If you want to buy a fresh turkey, you should really buy it within 1 to 3 days before Thanksgiving and keep it in your refrigerator. The really important thing to keep in mind is if you buy a frozen turkey, you need to thaw it safely. Do not thaw your turkey on the countertop. You can thaw it in the refrigerator, or you can even cook a frozen turkey from a frozen state, believe it or not.
It's delicious.
The good way to do it?
It really is.
Otherwise, sorry.
I was just going to say it takes about 50% longer to cook, so you have to factor that in on your Thanksgiving Day meal preparation. But you absolutely can cook it from frozen.
All right, and if it is frozen, you thaw it in the refrigerator.
That's correct.
And how many days is that, or days? Is it usually days?
Here's the answer. Longer than you think, right, Carmen?
You got it. That's right. I have many times tried to thaw my Thanksgiving turkey in the refrigerator and found that when I pull it out, the outside is thawed, but the inside is still somewhat frozen. And you just have to factor that in with your cooking time, which is why it's so important that you keep a meat thermometer on hand to make sure that the turkey is cooked to a safe internal temperature. But standard, it usually takes 3 to 4 days. If you have a larger turkey, it might take a day longer.
And if it's still frozen a little bit or all the way still frozen, if you've got that bag of everything inside the turkey cavity, it's okay to cook it with that in there?
You should remove the bag of whatever is inside the turkey, which is, you might use for a separate dish, but you should remove that bag. And I always recommend that you not stuff your bird with stuffing. It's tricky enough to get your turkey to the safe internal temperature of 165 degrees. If you then pack it with stuffing, you have to make sure that innermost part of that stuffing in the bird is also cooked to 165 degrees. And oftentimes the outside of your bird, the breasts and the legs will be done, and your stuffing still will be undercooked and could potentially have bacterial contamination from the inside of the bird. So I always recommend cook your stuffing in a separate casserole dish. If you do what Grandma does and insist on cooking it in your turkey, then just make sure you have a food thermometer on hand to have a safe internal temperature of 165 degrees in the center of that stuffing.
Do you assume this bird is clean before you cook it, or do you have to wash your turkey, or no?
You absolutely should not wash your turkey. And the reason is rinsing off a turkey does nothing to remove any sort of bacterial contamination that may exist on the outside of the bird. And what it can do is it can splash dangerous pathogens onto your surfaces. So you can't see bacteria, you can't smell it, but it can make people really sick. And so we recommend do not wash your bird in your kitchen sink. Even if you're planning to, Lysol the sink afterwards, you may end up splashing the water onto other parts of your kitchen that you don't realize. So don't wash your bird. The safe way to kill any sort of bacteria that might be on turkey or any meat that you're cooking is to make sure that you cook it.
Because you mentioned cooking a bird that is frozen, I just want to go back and confirm this. Because if you cook a bird that is completely frozen and you've got the giblets in the neck, that bag of stuff inside the cavity, so do you recommend then that as the bird is cooking and when that is no longer frozen hard in there like a rock, that you take that out during cooking?
Yes, that's correct. That's what I recommend.
Okay.
And have you seen cases of food poisoning from turkeys that were undercooked?
Yes, actually, We know that right now there actually is a salmonella outbreak associated with eating turkey that is undercooked or where there's been cross-contamination in the kitchen. And this is really important because even if you're cooking your turkey to the proper temperature, if you have handled the turkey and then handled other ready-to-eat foods without washing your hands properly, you could be contaminating other parts of your kitchen or other foods that you're serving your guests without realizing it. And so we know that people get ill from salmonella. We know that in the last year, there's been over 100 people who have gotten ill from turkey consumption, we believe, in particular, as we're working with Centers for Disease Control on this outbreak investigation. And so it's really important. It's just a really important reminder that you need to clean your surfaces, wash your hands after you've handled any sort of raw meat or poultry, and make sure that you're cooking your turkey to the proper internal temperature. And then really getting your leftovers back in the fridge within 2 hours of serving so that you can enjoy them the next day.
What was the temperature of that the stuffing should be and that the bird should be? And does that little plastic thermometer that pops out when it says it's ready, does that have any guidance whatsoever?
So it's an excellent question. I think the turkey manufacturers will have cooking instructions on the outside of the packaging, which definitely consumers should follow those cooking instructions, and they have to be validated, meaning they have to have tested those cooking instructions in their kitchen to make sure that they are accurate. And so the little piece that pops out of the turkey for that part of the bird, probably is correct. The issue is that if you, depending on what kind of roasting pan consumers are using in their own kitchen, can have some disparity in terms of how the underside of the turkey is cooked. And so you need to make sure that you're measuring the temperature of the bird at the thickest parts of the bird. So you need to do the innermost part of the thigh, the innermost part of the breast, and if you have stuffing inside your bird, you need to get the food thermometer all the way in the turkey. And you have to make sure that it's cooked to 165 degrees in each of those places. People think that they can cut into a bird, and if the juices run clear, then that means that they're good to go, and it's just not accurate. You have to use a food thermometer. I recommend a digital food thermometer because it's very easy to use and doesn't have to be calibrated. And really, you should be using a food thermometer all year long, but especially at Thanksgiving when most of us are cooking a bird, a piece of meat that's much larger than we typically cook the rest of the year. It's just critically important that people use a food thermometer this Thanksgiving.
All right. Did I hear you imply that if the leftovers are out for more than 2 hours, you should discard them?
That's correct. If
right.
the leftovers are not put away within 2 hours of serving, then you run the risk of having bacteria grow very quickly at room temperature. All
right. And any other questions? You've got a meat and poultry hotline, right?
Yeah, we have a meat and poultry hotline, and we staff it on Thanksgiving Day with live people to answer your questions. It's 1-888-MP hotline. That's for meat and poultry hotline. It's 888-674-6854. And it'll be open from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Time on Thanksgiving Day. Families can also access Ask Karen, which is a portal on our website. It's askkaren.gov. Or, of course, they can go to foodsafety.gov any time of the year to find temperature and cooking times on that foodsafety.gov website for a variety of meats.
Yeah, ask Karen. She knows everything you need to know, right? AskKaren.gov. Yeah. All right. So bottom line, 165 degrees. Make sure you cook it to that temperature. Cook the stuffing separately. And any leftovers that have been out for more than 2 hours, you ought to discard them. That's
right. And I will just add one additional item, which is, again, make sure that you're washing your hands early and often. So before you start preparing foods and any time after you have touched any raw meat or poultry, you have to wash your hands. People think they can grab the salt shaker or grab the basil and sprinkle it on. The problem is that you've then cross-contaminated other areas of your kitchen, and salmonella can live on surfaces for up to 33 hours. So you don't want to make your guests sick, so make sure that you're washing your hands throughout meal prep on Thanksgiving Day.
How long can you leave those leftovers in the fridge?
Well, it depends, but you usually should eat them within 3 to 4 days of being in the refrigerator.
Carmen, you have been most helpful. Carmen Rottenberg, Deputy Undersecretary for Food Safety at the USDA. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.